Welcome back to Say No To Lashon Hara, day 31. We left off yesterday talking about the idea that Rambam puts forward, where if Lashon Hara was said in front of 3 people, spreading it to more people is not considered Lashon Hara, according to him, because once it's said in a public group to 3 people, then we assume automatically that this is going to get to every part of the community. This is not going to be able to be held back. And therefore, if I was to share it, I'm not bringing something that wasn't anyway going to get to everybody's ears. So Chafetz Chaim now continues to chip away at the idea that anything that was said in front of 3 is okay. And he makes the window narrower and narrower as to where it can be deployed. So firstly, he says, what if the 3 listeners were very religious people who don't speak Lashon Hara? So obviously, if the whole point is that when 3 people hear it, you know that information is getting out. If the people are actually very religious, they're righteous, they're not people who speak Lashon Hara, then the logic would not apply because it's not actually going to get out. They will guard their tongues and they won't share what they've seen or what they've heard. So apet lata, which means in front of 3, this idea would not apply if they were religious or careful with shmirat halashon, with guarding their tongue. The Chafetz Chaim continues and says, well, if you need 3, so it's not that 3 people have to be religious or careful with Lashon Hara. Even if one of the 3 is a person who's careful and doesn't speak Lashon Hara, that would already mean that there aren't 3, because you have 2 people who will spread it and 1 that won't. So you don't have these 3 spreaders that one would imagine was necessary to be able to bring the chidush of Rambam that would allow someone to say Lashon Hara if 3 people had already been told the negative information. One other thing, says the Chafetz Chaim, is number 1, so it doesn't apply if there are 3 religious people. Number 2, it doesn't apply if one of the people is a religious person. And we're using the term religious here with regards to a person that's careful with speaking Lashon Hara, although those 2 things are not necessarily always synonymous. The Chafetz Chaim continues and says, what if one of the 3 is not righteous and not a non-Lashon Hara speaker, but he's a close friend of the person, or he's a relative? Now, the fact that someone is a relative or very close friend means that they're probably not going to carry on speaking negative things about their own friend. So again, if the 3rd person was righteous enough not to speak Lashon Hara, then the logic wouldn't apply. The logic would also not apply if one of the 3 people was a relative or dear friend of the person. Let's continue. The Chafetz Chaim then continues to chip away even more at this idea, because he says apet lata means that if you told 3 people, then those 3 people are going to tell it to their friends. But that's limited to the city that they live in. If a person has a Lashon Hara that was said to 3 people, which is going to spread in this community, but it's not necessarily likely that it will carry on to another community. So if I go to the next community and share those words, I'm bringing damaging information about this person that never actually would have got here. So another condition of apet lata is that it's only within limited geographical area in which it was said. So only within that community could we assume that anyway it would have become publicized. However, what if the information is incredibly disturbing, really, really, really negative, to the point that actually it would spread beyond just this community? In such a case, then we would say that the law of apet lata, according to Rambam, would stretch as far as that story would actually capture people's imaginations and their tongues. Now that we've given all these different limitations to the words of apet lata in terms of allowing it to be applied, we see that actually it's almost never really applicable to have this law of apet lata. Not only that, it seems that in the original point of in front of 3, which was said over in the name of Harambam, the Chafetz Chaim says that interpretation is really only Rambam's. And other great scholars did not believe, they did not understand according to the words of Rambam, what Rambam was saying, that if something was said in front of three, then you can say it to anyone. So that concludes our piece for today. And the Chafetz Chaim says, look, although there are books and there's various things that will allow us to look into whether or not something is useful, in general, says the Chafetz Chaim, better safe than sorry, not follow the lenient opinion of Rambam and be strict like the other opinions that disagree with him in terms of defining apet lata in a way where it is commonly used.